the very moment when I lost my mind. It's strange for me to say this, and it will probably be just as strange for you to hear, but I can remember the exact moment when I lost my mind. I'm not a psychiatrist, so I may not have technically lost him, but I do know that at that moment I only cared about one thing. I no longer cared about myself, my wife, or my job. I completely abandoned the generally accepted norms of human politeness. I remember it like it was yesterday. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little. My name is James. To my friends, I'm Jimmy. I married Mary 22 years ago. I won't go into a long tirade about how we met and fell in love, as that is not relevant to the story. Firstly, I am not one of those who can be called a real man. At 5'11" and 200 pounds, I have all the physical attributes to do it. But I don't do what can be called men's things. I can't change the oil in my car or fix anything in my house. I don't play sports games, although I watch them on TV. I think this is due to the fact that there was no man next to me when I was a child. My father did several tours overseas when I was in my teens. I only had my mother, aunt, sister, and her friends to guide me. When my father received permanent duty in the States, I was already formed. I remember one time he asked me to help him fix his backyard. I was about 10 years old. He reached into his trusty toolbox and pulled out the family hammer. It was a wooden hammer passed down from his grandfather to his father. Our family name, Watt, was carved into the side. After I missed 25 nails in a row, he took the hammer from me and suggested that I help my mom finish cooking dinner. As I walked towards the house, I looked back and saw my father just shaking his head. He shook his head in disgust. Secondly, I don't handle conflict well. Probably for the same reasons I don't consider myself masculine. I start to sweat, feel dizzy, feel nauseous, and sometimes have a real panic attack. My wife tried to help me deal with this for years, but nothing worked. The last thing you need to know is that we are an ordinary couple. We eat out about once a week. We have a 19-year-old daughter named Cindy who is finishing her first year of college when my story begins. Even our sex life is quite ordinary once or twice a week. We are essentially the couple that blends into the background. We're not ugly, but we're not models either. We simply are. It was a typical windy day in mid-March. I arrived home, parked the car in the garage, and entered the house through the kitchen. My wife Mary usually cooked dinner in the kitchen, but today she was just sitting at the kitchen table with a nearly empty glass of wine. I joked that it was too early to get drunk on wine. That's when she asked me to sit down and said we needed to talk. Darling, I want you to know that I love you very much. Probably even more today than the day I married you. My love for you grows stronger every day, she began. I want you to fully understand this before I tell you what I'm about to tell you. I think it's better to say everything at once. You know, like ripping off a Band-Aid. I'll just say it, and you can ask me questions or say something right after it. Fine. I muttered, okay, but I could already feel my palms starting to sweat. I knew it would be bad news. She started much the same way as 13 years ago, when she told me that my father had died. She took a long sip of wine and topped up her glass before continuing. It can't be said easily, so I'll just say it. I have been dating another man for the past 2 months. We met at the grocery store, if you can believe it. It all started innocently. Donnie complimented me every time he saw me. He told me how beautiful I was and how he hoped that one day he would meet a woman like me. I won't insult you with the details, but we ended up in bed a few weeks later. At first it was just sex, but I started to develop feelings for Donnie. He told me he loved me. I'm not sure I love him, but I care about him and his well-being. I felt dizzy and weak. How could she cheat on me? I found it strange that she mentioned his well-being. Who says that? Sweat began to stream down my face. I had to look around to concentrate. And that's when I saw it. Or more accurately, them. 2 suitcases neatly packed and lined up in a row in my living room. Are you leaving me? Her eyes followed my gaze, and she saw what I was looking at. God forbid, I'm not leaving you. I want you to remember what I just said, that I love you more than the day we met, even the day we got married. I love you too much to ever leave you. I can't even bear the thought of it. I was completely confused, on top of being on the verge of a panic attack. I knew the signs and I exhibited all of them. "Are you kicking me out?" I managed to squeeze out. It was quite difficult considering how dry my throat was. "No, that's not the point. This is your home, dear. This is our house. We will always share a bed. You will always be at the head of the table. You don't need." She was interrupted by a sound that brought me to an extreme panic attack. Up the stairs, the toilet flushed. I turned my head towards her. At least she had the conscience not to look me in the eye. The man who stole my wife was in my house. Donnie lost his apartment. He needed a place to stay until he could get back on his feet. I tried to stand up to escape, but my traitorous legs failed me as soon as I tried to stand up. I collapsed on the kitchen floor. I couldn't breathe. I fought for the tie so hard that I started to scratch the skin on my neck. "Oh shit, Donnie, fast, help me." Before I passed out, I felt him put his hands under my armpits and say, "I'll help you, buddy." When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the sofa in the living room. I had a wet towel on my forehead. My shirt and tie were off, and I was lying there in a tank top. I called Mary. "She went to the laundry room to throw your shirt and towels in the wash. My name is Donnie, by the way." I must have given him some kind of glare because he turned away from me and stared out the window overlooking the front yard. "Look, buddy, I understand that you hate me. I would hate myself too. But I love her. If the only way to have it is to share it, then so be it." Mary returned to the room and sat down on the sofa where I was lying. Donnie excused himself and went to the guest room where he stayed. "James, I don't know what's going on between me and Donnie. He loves me. I love you. I'm not sure how I feel about him. Maybe I'm polyamorous. You know, one of those people who can love many people at the same time. Maybe it's just a phase. I don't know. All I know is that I can't live without you. I need to get through this. I would have done this without your knowledge, but he lost his apartment and needed a place to stay. I know hiding it wouldn't have made anything better, but I didn't want to hurt you." I turned away from her and said, "I need time." "I understand. Your place is at the head of the table and in bed with me. Donnie lives in the guest room. If there's anything we can do to make this transition easier, just say it. I love you, darling." She kissed my forehead and went to bed. I just collapsed on the couch and stared at the ceiling until 5 a.m. I sneaked upstairs and grabbed my work clothes from the closet. I slowed down outside the guest room on the way to the bathroom and heard Donnie quietly snoring. My vision darkened and I hurried to the bathroom. I got dressed and left as quickly as possible. For the next week, my routine was the same. I got up before dawn and went to work. I stayed at work until late at night, ordered takeout, and came home after midnight when he knew Mary and Donnie were already asleep. I left instructions to the secretary not to connect my calls to my wife. She called me on my cell phone constantly and wrote endless messages. "Honey, are you okay? We need to talk about this. Why are you still at work?" I sent her excuses about how work had become very busy and I needed to stay late. We all knew that I was avoiding the situation at home. This worked for a week until my boss came to see me. "What? We have a problem." Security called me and complained. "They say you come at 5:30 every morning all week and stay until midnight. We don't have enough staff to monitor parking and other things outside of normal business hours. If you get robbed or worse, killed, it will be our responsibility. I don't know what your problem is, but you can't hide here." I said I understood and that I would return to my normal schedule. I refused his offer to talk about it. How can I tell my boss that my wife brought her lover to my house? I would become a laughing stock. I needed a new strategy. I decided to go home and see what would happen. I walked into the house and Donnie was sitting on the couch watching TV and Mary was in the kitchen. "I didn't expect to see you at home. Have you solved the problem at work?" she asked with hope in her eyes. "I'm not sure," I replied. "The boss said I shouldn't stay late and try to figure it out during a normal 9 to 5. She invited me to make myself comfortable and said that dinner would be ready in a few minutes. She will set the table and call us. I sat down on the sofa, and that bastard was sitting in my chair. I decided to try to be funny. "Hey, Donnie, what are you looking at?" "Sports Center. They're doing a story about the Yankees. God, how I hate them." "I grew up in New York. I'm a Yankees fan," I told him. "Nothing personal. I hate you because you always win. I'd trade 6 of my guys for 1 jetter." "Dinner is ready, you too," Mary called. By the time I got to the kitchen table, Donnie was already sitting. Next to my wife. My seat was opposite my wife and her lover. I couldn't stand it. I said I needed to do something and went into the basement, locking the door behind me. After standing there for about 20 minutes, I decided to make myself as comfortable as possible. I pulled out the beach chair and set it down. My phone beeped when I received a message from my wife. "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm working on something. This may take time. You must eat without me. You should probably go to bed without me too." "Okay, work on what you need to do. Do not rush. I miss you in bed. Will you come when you're done?" I texted her back saying I'd take a look and turned off the phone. I sat down on a lounge chair and just looked around. The wall in front of which the lounge chair stood tormented me. Boxes of Christmas decorations, boxes of photo albums, and the like. Anything to remind me of the happy times I spent with my wife. Just me and her. I turned 180 degrees to get rid of it all and stared straight at what was worse. It was a brown box, about 2 feet in size, with "Daddy's Stuff" written on the side in black marker. This box was the only thing my father left me in his will, besides his warehouse. In his later years, he bought a warehouse in the industrial part of the city to have more space to work on his machines and projects. It was in an area that is now very run down. I haven't been there for almost 10 years. I took the box and opened it. On top were 3 of his work shirts, then a half-dozen car magazines with dog-eared pages and highlighted articles. Maybe it would have been written in German, I would not have understood anything. Next came a folded American flag and its tokens. At the bottom of the box was his latest mockery. Toolbox. I opened it and took out the family hammer. I lay down on the lounge chair and ran my fingers over the carved letters that spelled out "What." I dozed off. I don't know how long I slept, but when I wiped the sleep from my eyes, I knew that I didn't wake up on my own. At first, the sound was very quiet. I heard it, but didn't know where it was coming from. I stood up and took the cover off the vent, and was then able to discern what the sound was. I heard Mary. They had sex. I sat back down on the sun lounger. I clutched the hammer to my chest and cried again. It's been 4 weeks since Donnie moved in. True to her word, my wife left me alone to figure it out. At least most of the time. There were still little conversations she wanted to have, reminding me how much she loved me, how much she wanted me back in our bedroom, and how much she wanted to make love. Ever since we talked in the kitchen, I haven't kissed her. My life became about working, and then coming home, hiding in the basement until they both fell asleep, and then I would go out and sleep on the couch. I set up a lounge chair in the basement, a small refrigerator, and a radio so I could listen to Yankees games. I also listened to them having sex twice a week for the last 3 weeks. No, I'm not one of those who enjoy it. For me, it was more like a punishment. The punishment for what, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe I felt the need to punish myself for not giving her what she needed. Maybe I felt the need to punish myself for pushing her into another man's arms. Maybe I felt the need to punish myself for not stopping it. I opened the vent to receive my punishment, and at first I thought I heard moaning. But when I listened, I realized that these were not moans. My wife was sobbing. I listened to their conversation carefully with Donnie. "I don't know what to do, Donnie. I love him so much. I didn't think it would hurt him so much. He does not speak with me. He doesn't spend time with me. He barely looks at me and hasn't touched me in 4 weeks. I don't mean just sex. I mean he didn't initiate any touching at all. He doesn't kiss me when he comes home from work. He doesn't stroke my hair. He doesn't hug me when I wash the dishes. It's like I lost my husband. It's worse because I see him every day. What should I do? Calm down, Mary. This guy will come to his senses. It was a huge shock to his system. But like I told you, he's relied on you for so long that that's all he knows. He comes home and hides in the basement because you aren't there to guide him towards something else. So why don't you take off those underwear and I'll make you forget about all this? All you think about is sex. I'm losing my husband, the man I love, and all you want to do is have sex. You may love him, Mary, but I love you. And right now, I would like to see you without these underwear. If you want it so bad, why don't you go and do it to yourself? My wife screamed. Some rustling noises were heard, and the door slammed loudly. Before closing the vent, I heard one last statement. That fucking Jimmy, Donnie said with hatred in his voice. For the first time in 4 weeks, a smile appeared on my face. 6 weeks after Donnie moved in, problems began in our home. My wife was irritated most of the time. The rest of the time she cried in her room. Donnie was annoyed and probably sexually unsatisfied since they had only slept once in the last 2 weeks. I lived as if I didn't exist. I was still hiding in the basement. But tonight I wanted to ask my wife something. Mary, can I talk to you? I asked her. She was shocked. Not only because I wasn't hiding, but also because I started a conversation. Jimmy, you can ask me anything. Well, Cindy has to come home from college next week after her exams. I wanted to know what you were going to tell her about Donnie. Oh, I didn't think about that. I think I'll tell her half the truth. Donnie is a friend who we help in a difficult time, and he lives in the guest room. I'll probably keep the rest a secret. Fine. I was just curious, I said, heading back to the basement. Before reaching him, the wife managed to make one last remark. I'm more worried about what to tell her about you hiding in the basement and sleeping on the couch. I knew what she was trying to do. She knew that I loved my daughter and did not want to shift our problems onto her. My wife thought that this way she could bring me back to our bedroom. She might have been right if fate hadn't intervened. Or in this case, Donnie. I was having lunch in the office when the secretary knocked and entered. Mr. Bourgeois, there is a man here who calls himself Donnie and says that he urgently needs to see you. He says it's important and has to do with family. He looks a little angry. Should I let him in or call security? Let him come in, but if you hear any noise, call security immediately. Donnie walked in looking angry for all the world. I invited him to sit down, but he refused. Listen, Jimmy, we need to talk. Man to man. Be at this address exactly at 7 p.m. I'll be waiting there, so don't be late, he said, handing me a business card. I quickly ran my eyes over it and realized that this was an address several cities away from us, in not the best area. Okay, the area was complete crap. Donnie, you're here. I'm here. Just say what you want to say, I said, starting to sweat. I thought that while the conversation might be difficult, it was better to have it here at work with security nearby than in some shady place. Just be there, he said, and turned and walked out. As soon as he left, I looked up the address on Google. It turned out he wanted to meet at a bar. Reviews of the place ranged from stay away to only if you don't fear for your life. Something told me that today was not my day. I arrived at the bar exactly at 7 p.m. I was right. It was a shitty place. The waitress looked 8 months pregnant, had a fresh black eye and a cigarette in her mouth. There were bikers there, and a few guys who looked like they'd just gotten off cooking meth. Donnie seemed in a much better mood as he waved me over to his table. Get me some tequila and beer and some whiskey on the rocks for my friend, Donnie told the waitress. While she brought us drinks, I looked around the bar for a quick exit in case the shooting started. Listen, Jimmy, Donnie began as soon as the waitress left. We must settle this matter between you and your wife. She loves you very much. I know that my presence has disrupted your way of life. I never wanted to interfere in your relationship, but when I saw her in the store, magic appeared between us. Are you listening to me? I have to admit that I didn't listen. As soon as he opened his mouth, the hair on my neck stood up and I started sweating. I tried to concentrate. I looked out the window and noticed how the sun had almost set. I looked up at the TV and saw Jeter leading the Yankees onto the field against the Rays. When Donnie slammed his fist on the table, my attention returned to him. I listened carefully to what he said next. Okay, screw it. I tried to be a good guy, but it doesn't work. So I'll get to the truth. I can't believe that for the first time in my life, I have to rely on the truth. I don't love your wife. I have never loved and never will. What are you talking about? I asked him. I don't love her. My plan was to fuck her a few times and move on. As I always do. I'm not one to fall in love. This is why I usually get involved with married women. They become mad because it is so unusual for them. They do crazy things. My original plan was to turn your cute wife into my affordable, sexy girlfriend and then move on to the next conquest. I was just unlucky that I lost my apartment at a time when I was going to give it up. Instead of leaving her, I told her I loved her, thinking she would throw me some money for a new apartment. Instead, she came up with the brilliant idea of inviting me to live with you until I got back on my feet. It was wonderful for me. I needed a place to live, and having a wife and living with her and her husband is just awesome. But you ruined everything with your silence and hiding in the basement. My dirty bitch got emotional because of how you feel, and the sexual pleasures stopped for me. Why are you telling me this? I'm telling you this because I need your help. I have several things to do, and in a month I will have my own apartment. I'm not going to stay at your house without sex for a month, so I want you to stop complaining and start paying attention to your wife so that she becomes sexually active again. It would be nice if you touched her sometimes too. This might be good for you. You will behave well, and when I leave, I will present you as a hero. I'll tell her how bad I felt for interfering in your marriage, and how much you love her and how much it hurt you, and that I can't stand between two people who love each other so much. I will tell her that you love her so much that you were willing to not only let her take another lover, but also let him live in your house to make her happy. I can turn it around so that she loves you more than ever, and she will try to die in bed with you. Unless you behave, Donnie said, leaning closer to me to emphasize his point. Well, let's just say your little girl is coming back next week, and she's damn pretty. What did you just say? I asked. I couldn't believe my ears. I was so shocked by everything Donnie had just said that I didn't take his hint. You continue to act like a pathetic whiner. I will make sure that I become friends with your daughter. She thinks I'm a family friend. You've seen how convincing I can be. 2 days maximum, and I will own her body. I've already taken your wife. Don't make me take your daughter, too. Now I'm going home to have sex with your wife, he said, grabbing my car keys from the table. Sit here and think about what I said. You can take a taxi, he added, taking his jacket and leaving. This was the moment when I lost my mind. He threatened my little girl. A strange feeling came over me as he began to walk away. It was an eerie calm. I no longer sweated or felt nauseous. My mind was focused. But he was focused on only one thing. My only thought was to protect my little girl from this guy. I no longer cared about my job, my wife, or whether I should stay in my marriage. Hell, I didn't even care if I lived or died as long as that bastard never touched my little girl. A hand grabbing my shoulder brought me out of my stupor. I looked up to see who was shaking me. He looked like something out of a 1950s hoodlum movie. He was wearing a white t-shirt, blue jeans, and a leather jacket. His hair was combed back, and a thin gold chain hung around his neck. I asked. I think he was saying something, and I didn't understand what. Idiot, I'm not going to repeat it. Get up and get out of this pub. I've asked you 3 times already. I looked at his girlfriend, and she was completely fake. There was nothing real about her. She wore false eyelashes, her lips were inflated with Botox, she had fake hair, and her breasts were cartoonishly large. Then I noticed something that caused me to panic a little. I looked over her shoulder at the TV. The Yankees won 4-2. It was the start of the 5th inning. The game had to last at least an hour. What the hell? I looked out the window, and it was completely dark. I picked up my glass and examined it carefully. The outside of the glass was covered with sweat, but all the ice inside had melted and it was warm. "Hey, asshole," the bully shouted. "Get out of the pub. I'm not going to repeat it." "But I haven't finished my drink yet," I told him, showing him the glass I was holding. "Now you're done," he said, grabbing the glass from my hand, pouring its contents onto the floor and placing the glass on the bar counter. Then he grabbed my left elbow with his left hand, and with his right hand he grabbed my armpit and pushed me out of the tavern towards the bar. I suddenly felt a cold breeze on my face and heard a voice behind my right shoulder. "If I let you go, will you be calm? I can't let you get mad again." "I'll be calm," I said honestly, not feeling the least bit of anxiety. Suddenly, I realized that I was outside, and it was the guard talking to me. "How did I end up outside?" I asked. "Mate, are you okay?" the guard answered. "Please just tell me what happened and how I ended up outside." I was scared. Twice almost in a row, I lost time and did not know what was happening. "I was walking when I heard that guy yelling at you. He pulled you out of your chair and pushed you towards the bar. You grabbed the empty glass from the counter and hit him on the head. As he grabbed his head, you grabbed a bar stool and smashed his knees. He fell like a stone. You kicked him 4 or 5 times before I could get to you and stop you. Sorry, buddy, but you have to leave. We're not the kind of place where they call the police, but you can't stay here. Are you sure you're okay?" I assured him that I was fine, thanked him, and quickly left. What the hell is going on? Is my consciousness playing a cruel joke on me? I passed out and attacked this bully guy. Or was my mind playing a cruel joke when I was talking to the guard? I walked 2 blocks and got into a taxi. I asked the taxi driver to stop at the pharmacy on the way home to buy bandages. Apparently, I really got into a fight with that bully guy. I cut my hand when I hit him with a glass. Little did I know it would be even worse at home. Or better yet, decide for yourself. I quietly entered the house through the front door. I didn't have a car, so I didn't go in through the side door. I tried to be quiet, thinking that if they were fucking upstairs, I could get in undetected. This thought was shattered when I entered the living room. Donnie was sitting naked on the couch I was sleeping on. My wife satisfied him. They didn't notice me because her back was towards me and his head was thrown back and his eyes were closed. I watched for about 45 seconds. "Hey, big guy, glad you got home safely." "Hello, dear. Donnie told me that you talked to him for a long time and were finally able to figure out what was bothering you. I knew you just needed to talk to someone. I'm so glad that the difficult times are over," my wife said. "Donnie said we talked?" I asked. "Yes, good friend. I told her about our conversation. Without details, this is a man's conversation. But I told her that now things will be a little different. It will be better for everyone." While he was talking, he began to stroke my wife's body. I went upstairs. I got halfway up the stairs when I looked back. Donnie looked at me with hatred, and my wife covered herself with a blanket, looking embarrassed. "If you're going to have sex where I sleep, I'm going upstairs to sleep," I said. I quickly locked the bedroom door. I took off the bed linen and put on clean ones. Just as I was about to lie down, I heard a knock on the door. Then came a crash. Donnie yelled that we needed to talk. I took out my headphones from the bedside table and started listening to music. I thought it would be difficult to come up with a plan, but it only took 20 minutes. I decided that I would rather sleep. I had a lot to do the next day and not much time. I heard muffled conversations coming from the kitchen as I walked down the stairs the next day. I stopped halfway down to listen and see what I could hear. The only thing I could make out was my wife saying, "How could I ruin our marriage like that?" I reached the bottom of the stairs, fully prepared to just walk away without interacting with them, but there it was. It mocked me. It seemed as if the sofa was mocking me. I took off my jacket and put it on the chair, and then began to drag the sofa to the front door. I opened the door and started to move the couch out when I looked towards the kitchen and saw my wife and Donnie just looking at me from the kitchen. They just stood there and watched, not knowing what to say or do at that moment. After I finally took the couch to the curb along with the rest of the trash, I went back to get my jacket. "Honey, are you okay?" asked my wife. I muttered yes. and continued putting on my jacket. "Why don't you sit in the kitchen and I'll make you something to eat?" "No, thank you, Mary. I'll stop by IHOP on my way to work." "I can make you waffles and bacon here. Why pay for IHOP?" "Because I'm pretty sure the person who brings my waffles and bacon to IHOP isn't a fucking bitch," I blurted, heading for the door. As soon as I slammed the door, I heard Donnie shout that I was the son of a bitch, and my wife started crying. I didn't have time for them. I had a lot to do and little time. It turns out I may have been wrong. The waitress at IHOP looked like a fucking bitch. I laughed too loudly when she brought me the check. I went through my list of places to visit and things to do and put them in the following order. 1. Bank. 2. Western Union. 3. Call Cindy. 4. Visit to the doctor. 5. Pharmacy. 6. Call the power company. 7. Sex shop. 8. Hardware store. 9. Grocery store. 10. Liquor store. I left the waitress an extra $10 for having fun at her expense. It was time to move. The stop at the bank took much less time than I expected. You think they would have spent more time cashing out my bonds and processing a loan into my 401k. Instead, it only took me 15 minutes to walk out of the bank with $25,000 in cash. I combined the following 2 items on my list. I called Cindy while I was standing in line at Western Union. I spoke to her very briefly. I told her that my mom and I have problems, but we are working on solving them. I told her I would send her $5,000 via Western Union and that I wanted her and her boyfriend to go on a week-long vacation. I told her that my mom and I needed this extra time alone to finally work through our issues. She wanted to call her mom and thank her for the money for her vacation. I advised her not to do this, saying that her mother did not know that I took the money, and telling her about it could cause a new scandal. I told her to wait a few days and call us from where they were going. After waiting about an hour in the doctor's office, I was finally seen. As soon as he asked me what the problem was, I burst into tears. I told him that my wife was cheating on me and that she had brought her lover to the house. I told him that I have a terrible time falling asleep when they have sex all over the house. He prescribed me sleeping pills. It will help me fall asleep and enter the REM phase, and then my body will take control. He also told me to take it right before I get ready for bed, as it works quite quickly. I thanked him, reminding him of medical confidentiality, and moved on. He called the pharmacy and my prescription was ready when I got there. I sat in the car for almost an hour talking to the power company. I gave them my information and credit card number over the phone, and they said they would fulfill my request within an hour. By the time I made the last 4 stops, it was almost 4:30 p.m. Time was on my side. I parked the car in the garage, making sure I only took what I needed out of the car right away and headed inside. I noticed that neither my wife nor Donnie thought to put the couch back since it was still sitting in the trash. "You son of a bitch," my wife screamed as soon as I closed the door. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? The bank called me today to make sure everything was okay since we never withdraw more than $1,000 at a time. If you think for even a second that you will hide this money and divorce me, you are very mistaken. I told you we weren't getting divorced over this, and I meant it. So God help me, if you file for divorce, I will fight to the last minute to put it off, go to counseling, and if I can't stop the divorce, I will take every last cent we have. You worthless bastard, mate." "That was a surprise," I said, looking at the floor. My submissive behavior and what I said stopped her. She looked at me, confused and confused. It was time to try to fulfill our plans. "Listen, honey," I said, taking her hand in mine. "I know I didn't handle it well. I know I was a real asshole last night and this morning. After talking to Donnie last night, I started to feel better about the situation. I think I drank too much, because when I came home and saw how much pleasure Donnie brought you, I immediately thought that he was better than me and that you would go to him. That's why I lost it. I lost my temper this morning because I was ashamed of my behavior last night. I took the money to try to make things right between the 3 of us. I have a few surprises in store, like buying a new sofa," I said with a grin. I was going to cook us a nice dinner and tell us all about it then. Now, honey, why don't you and Donnie sit in the living room, and I'll get you a glass of Pinot Noir to enjoy while I cook the steaks and baked potatoes. It's still your favorite, isn't it? Yes, she said with a smile on her face. I went to the kitchen and made them wine. I opened one sleeping pill capsule and poured its contents into her glass. Donnie was a little larger, so I poured 2 capsules into his glass. I brought them their wine as they settled comfortably on the couch. I wonder if they knew what was about to happen. I went back to the kitchen and put in the steaks and potatoes. About 5 minutes later, I heard Mary scream, "Jimmy, come here quickly. I think there's something wrong with Donnie." I walked into the living room and saw her leaning over Donnie. His mouth was open and drool was flowing from it. He muttered something and his eyes were half closed. I looked at the coffee table and saw that one glass of wine was empty and the other was completely full. "Honey, you didn't drink your wine." "There's something wrong with Donnie and you're talking about wine? What is wrong with you? Wait, did you add something to the wine? What is wrong with you? I cannot believe." Her eyes rolled back as my right hand hit her just above her left eye, knocking her out. It's weird because I remember at that moment wondering if prison was like what they see on TV, and if the food there was really that bad. I went back to the car to get the last of the bags from the back seat. First, there was a bag from a sex shop, which contained 2 gags and blindfolds. Then there was the bag from the hardware store. I put blindfolds and gags on both of them. I then tied their arms and legs with zip ties and then wrapped duct tape around their arms. I dragged Donnie to the garage and somehow managed to stuff him into the trunk. I picked up my wife and put her in the back seat. When everything was done, I thought again about prison and how I might end up there if my plan didn't work. I returned to the house and finished cooking dinner. If I go to jail, this will probably be the last good meal I'll have for a long time. As my wife began to regain consciousness, I threw an ice-cold glass of water in her face to speed up her awakening. It took her a few seconds to realize the situation she was in. She sat upright on a hard wooden chair. Her wrists were tied with zip ties to the arms of the chair, and her ankles were tied to the legs above the support bar to prevent her from lifting the chair to free herself. She was still gagged and blindfolded. She began to thrash about, but was tied too tightly. Panic showed on her face, and she began to cry. "Honey, I want you to calm down. I'm not going to hurt you. Well, I'm not going to hurt you anymore. Sorry for the hit in the face. Sleeping pills were my first option, but you didn't drink the wine. I need you to see something. I'll remove the gag. Please don't shout. We're in my dad's old warehouse, and no one will hear you at this time. Yelling will only give me a headache." I took off the gag. She stretched and parted her jaws. "Jimmy, please don't kill me." She started crying again. "Honey, if I wanted to kill you, you would have been dead hours ago. Like I said, I need you to see and hear something. Look over there," I said, pointing to the laptop on the table. "This is a live broadcast of what is happening in another room. Donnie is in the same situation as you. He is connected just like you. He's still unconscious, but okay. I go to him to talk. I'll gag you again so you don't scream while I'm talking to him. Do you need anything before this?" She asked for water, and I gave her some. There was still fear in her eyes when I put the gag on her again, but it seemed to me that it was not fear for my safety, but for what I could do. I left it in the office and went to the workshop. Donnie was still unconscious. He was tied to the chair, but with one difference. His arms were secured flat on the chair's arms. 3 spotlights shone directly in his face. I didn't want him to see the camera pointed at him, and I didn't want him to see too much of his surroundings. I waited for about half an hour until he started to come to his senses. When he started mumbling, I hit him in the face as hard as I could. "Wake up, Donnie," I shouted, and the fog in his head began to clear. The "I ruined everything" look that appeared on his face was priceless. "Donnie, we need to talk man to man again. Oh, wait, you still have a gag. It's hard to talk with a gag in your mouth. Let me take it off." I walked over and took off the gag. "What did you do to Mary?" These were his first words. I won't lie, it surprised me so much that I stopped. He knew he was in a bad position, and his first thought was of her. I almost respected him for that. It only lasted a split second when the thought occurred to me that he was asking about her to find out what was in store for him. Donnie, let's just say Mary's gone. And no. What do you mean? Donnie, you're a smart guy. I guess I don't need to explain this, right? But Mary is the past. Let's talk about the present. About you and me and how this will develop. Jimmy, please don't hurt me, man. You don't have to do this. I thought we had an agreement. You know I never loved her. I told you I just had her. I told you I'll be leaving soon. I know I went a little overboard when I moved in with you and threw it all in your face, but she was your wife, Jimmy. She was the one who broke the vows. She was the one who took your trust and threw it away for some lame sex. Now, I admit that I knew she was married, but I never wanted to come between you two. She was the one who said that we should tell you and that you would welcome me into your home. Damn it, Jimmy, it's her fault you're so angry. I'm just a horny guy who took advantage of the opportunity. You can't kill me for this, can you? I turned and looked at the camera, then back at Donnie. Donnie, I know all this. I told you that Mary is the past. I've already dealt with her betrayal. You are sitting in this chair because you threatened my daughter. Come on, man. It was a joke. Okay, not really a joke, just a threat. I knew you wouldn't be involved in this wife-splitting business. Your wife was saying how much you love your daughter and how much she loves that you always take care of her and that you would never do anything to hurt her. I thought a little threat would force you to play by the rules during the short time I stayed with you. I never intended to touch her, I promise. I stood up and pretended to think about his words. I walked around the spotlights so that he couldn't see me. I looked at the camera one last time, then turned it off. My wife shouldn't see what happens next. Donnie, the problem is that I don't believe you. I think your slippery little ass would really try to steal my daughter from me. Would you? How did you put it? I need to make sure you never even think about touching her. He began to protest when I put the gag on him again. Once the gag was securely fastened, I walked over to the table and picked up the hammer. With my father's hammer in hand, I walked up to Donnie, who had tears in his eyes. I raised the hammer over my shoulder and hit Donnie's wrist. After that, there were several more blows. I threw the hammer on the table and sat down opposite Donnie. The drop in adrenaline left me very tired, and I suddenly felt tired. I caught my breath, waiting for Donnie to regain consciousness. When he began to come to his senses, he moaned and cried. I hit him in the face to get his attention. Donnie, nod if you hear me and understand. Fine. As I said, your debt is paid. But if you even think about my little girl, the hammer and I will come visit you. Nod again if you understand. Fine. Now I'm going to dump your sorry ass in the middle of nowhere. If I were you, I'd come up with a good story for when you get to the Say you were robbed or run over. Something like that. Maybe you will have the courage to do something stupid, like call the police or take a gun and come after me or my daughter. This would be a bad idea. You see, I kept $20,000 of the money I took from the bank as a kind of insurance policy. If I get arrested, killed, have an accident, or disappear, the money will turn from insurance into a contract on your head. The same thing will happen if something happens to Cindy. Accept your losses and leave. Do you understand? He nodded again. I took off the gag. Say it. I understand. Fine. Now get out of my sight before I decide your life isn't worth the gas to take you out. I put the gag and blindfold on him again. I put it in the trunk of the car and drove out of the warehouse, leaving my wife still bound and gagged in the office. I rode, mostly in circles, for about half an hour before stopping in a deserted area. I pulled it out of the trunk and threw it on the ground. I cut the zip ties on his arms and told him to wait until he heard my car drive away before removing the gag and blindfold. This is goodbye, Donnie. I guess needless to say, if I ever see you again, it will end with me digging a hole. Having dealt with Donnie, I returned to the warehouse to deal with my wife. I went back to the warehouse and left my wife bound and gagged while I loaded up all the flashlights, cameras, laptop, and everything else I had brought. Then I went upstairs and brought my wife. I untied her left hand, moved it to her right hand, and tied them together with a zip tie. Then I freed her right arm from the chair and then her leg. I took her out to the car, put her in the back seat, and drove home in silence. When we got home, I told her to stay put while I unloaded everything from the car and cleaned it up. When I was finished, I poured myself a drink, placed the glass on the coffee table in the living room, and headed back to the garage. I used pruning shears to cut the zip ties on her arms. I threw the pruning shears in the back seat next to her and walked back into the house. I took a good sip of my drink while sitting in the living room. I wonder if she will run to call the police. That thought quickly went away when I heard her come in and close the garage door. I heard her breathing as she stood behind me in the living room doorway. I wonder if she thought about stabbing me in the back with a pair of pruning shears. I decided not to risk it. "Aren't you wondering where the money went?" I asked without turning around. She walked around me and sat down in the chair opposite me. Her hands were empty, so it looked like she had no intention of killing me. "I'm not entirely sure what you think about what happened in the last 12 hours. I don't think I ever told you how I felt these last few months. You're probably mad at me, but we'll talk about this later. In terms of money, I sent $5,000 to Cindy to go on vacation. I didn't want her here for the next few days. The rest of the money went towards an insurance policy. You might be so angry that you'll try to kill me in my sleep or call the police for what I did. If something like this happens to me, some of my friends will come to you, and they won't be as kind as me. You're the only unanswered question now that Donnie is dead. I'm sure you have questions or something you want to say. I want you to take a few days and really think about what you're going to say, because one wrong word and I don't even know how I'll react. Now, why don't you clean up and go to bed?" She sat there for a few minutes, looking at me like I was a stranger, before going upstairs, showering, and going to bed. I think I really was a stranger to her, and for myself too. This was uncharted territory for me. Let's see how this all unfolds. 3 quiet days passed. We both existed in the house without saying a word to each other. She cooked and cleaned, but we didn't eat together or sleep together. She was waiting for me when I returned home. I sat in the same place in the kitchen where I was on that fateful day. She asked to talk. I said we should move to the living room. We sat down opposite each other, and she began. "I've been thinking a lot about us and everything that's happened in the last few days. You must think I'm terrible, and you're not wrong. As I said then, my love for you has never waned, although my mind has changed. I convinced myself that this Donnie thing would never come between us, but it did. It was nice when someone new told me that I was beautiful and smart. I know you told me that too, but somehow it was different. I started to think that you were telling me this because you had to, since you are my husband. Recently, I stopped thinking that you say this because it really is true, that you really think I'm beautiful and smart. I took you for granted and convinced myself that if you left, I could get over it. I didn't know what I had until you stopped talking to me, touching me, and basically left me high and dry. If that makes sense, I screwed up. I really screwed up. I just hope it's not so bad that we can't fix it. I love you, and I will do anything to make this work between us, Jimmy." I got up from the chair and approached my wife. I leaned over and kissed her forehead. "Do you know I waited 3 days to hear these words? Now pack your things and get the hell out of here." "What?" she said almost in a whisper. "You heard me. I'm not going to live with a cheating bitch. Pack your things and get out. I'll give you 30 minutes, I said as I started setting the timer on my iPhone. "But, darling," she began to beg, 30 minutes and you'll be out the door. By taxi or ambulance, but in 31 minutes you'll be out the door." She looked at me again as if I were a stranger, or as if she was seeing me for the first time. She didn't quite understand what to do. She just sat there and watched her heart break. After 4 minutes she got up, with tears in her eyes, and went upstairs. I heard movement upstairs, but wasn't sure what she was doing. Would I really hurt my wife? The woman I've loved for so many years. My daughter's mother. Honestly, I'm not sure. Fortunately, it didn't come to that. She walked down the stairs and placed her suitcases by the front door. She turned and looked at me with sadness in her eyes. She took 3 steps towards me, but stopped when the alarm signaling the end of 30 minutes began to ring. I turned off the signal. She came over to me and knelt in front of me. I love you, Jimmy. I have from the moment I first saw you, and I will love you until my last breath. She leaned towards me and kissed me on the lips. She stood up and tried to leave before the tears began to fall. She failed. She grabbed her bags and walked out the door, out of my life. As soon as the door closed, I burst into uncontrollable sobs. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't control it. The truth is that even after everything she did, I still loved my wife, and it hurt me too to kick her out. To say my daughter was furious would be an understatement. She accused me of sending her money to get her out of the way and kick her mother out. She was absolutely right, and I had no defense against her accusations. I wasn't going to tell her what a bitch her mother was. She was going to live with her boyfriend. While my daughter was packing, I took her boyfriend aside. I explained to him that I had a problem with one person who could use my daughter against me. I told him not to tell Cindy because I didn't want to scare her unnecessarily. I told him to keep his eyes open. I gave him Donnie's name and description and told him to call me if he saw anyone matching my description. He asked me if it had anything to do with Mary and I breaking up. I simply told him that I hold him responsible for my daughter's safety. When he shook my hand, my daughter screamed at him to stay away from me. It turns out I didn't have to worry about Donnie for long. I picked up the newspaper 2 months later and found out that he had been killed. I did some research and found out that Donnie couldn't help himself. He was in a restaurant and told some woman that he loved her and that if the only way to be with her was to share her, then so be it. Apparently her husband knew better that his wife was cheating because he was at the restaurant. He walked up to their table, grabbed a steak knife and shouted, "I'm not sharing her," and plunged the knife into Donnie's chest. Donnie died instantly. I would have preferred him to suffer more, but you don't always get what you want. As for me, I divorced my wife. We let the lawyers sort it out. We were never in the same room at the same time, so I didn't have to see her. She tried to talk to me several times. I just couldn't do it. I didn't know if I would feel love or hate, and I was afraid of feeling either. The house was sold, and I moved to another state. Now I live in a 1-room apartment. Everything is fine at work. My company allowed me to transfer to another office, but I became the lowest in the hierarchy. My personal life is terrible. I had been out of the game for so long that I became clumsy and insecure. Most of my dates end after the first time, so I have a lousy job, a crummy 1-room apartment, and almost no personal life. These are the sacrifices I made for my daughter. I saw my wife one more time. 3.5 years after this whole situation with Donnie, I heard through friends that my daughter was getting married. I knew I wouldn't get an invitation. I found out where my wife lives. She recently moved in with her new boyfriend. I went to her. They were leaving the house and walking towards his car when I approached. "Hello, Mary." "Oh my God, Jimmy, is it you? I cannot believe it. Scott, this is Jimmy, my ex-husband. Jimmy, this is Scott, my boyfriend." Scott and I shook hands as he gave me a look that said, "Don't start any trouble." I didn't know what she told him and what she didn't, but it seemed like I was bad to everyone. I was fine with that. "Mary, can I talk to you for a second?" I asked. Scott looked at her as if asking if she would be okay. "Certainly." "Scott, wait for me by the car," she asked, calming him down. Scott walked to his car. "Jimmy, it's been almost 4 years. How are you?" "Listen, Mary, I don't want to take up much of your time," I said as I walked her to Scott's car. "I heard that Cindy is getting married. I know she hates me, and I don't blame her. I'm so sorry, Jimmy. I never told her the truth. I was ashamed of myself and what I had done. I let her hate you so she wouldn't hate me." "Mary, it's in the past. I just want you to tell her this. I know it's not much, but that's what I had. She can use this to start a new life with her husband. I handed her the envelope. Jesus, Jimmy, there must be $15,000 in here. Actually, I said, opening the passenger door and helping her into the seat, there's $20,000 here. It turned out that I never needed them. Tell Cindy I love her. I'll let you get on with your business. With tears in her eyes, Mary thanked me and Scott said, "Oh, nothing special. We're just going grocery shopping." "Do you always go grocery shopping with your girlfriend, Scott?" I asked. "Always," he replied. "You're smarter than me, Scott," I said, closing the door and walking away. It's been 3 days since Mary left my life. At first I felt empty, but then I slowly started to come back to life. I started doing work again, interacting with colleagues, and even thought about trying to date again. My colleagues noticed the change in my behavior and supported me during this difficult period. I started going to the gym, which helped me cope with stress and gave me a sense of control over my life. I was promoted at work and finally got the position I had been striving for many years. This gave me confidence in my abilities and allowed me to focus on my career. I began to make plans for the future, gradually returning to normal life. My daughter Cindy also found her place in life. Her relationship with her boyfriend was growing stronger, and I was happy to see how happy she was. She and I began to gradually restore our relationship. I tried to be there, support her, and be a better father than I was before. Although she had a hard time forgiving me for kicking her mother out, over time she realized that I did it for her safety and our future. One evening, I received an unexpected call from Mary. She called to say that Cindy was having a baby and would become a grandmother. I was stunned but very happy about this news. This was a new stage in our lives, and I knew that my goal now was to be a better grandfather than I was as a father. Mary and I decided to meet and discuss our future and the future of our family. We both understood that we had many mistakes in the past, but we wanted to try to correct them for the sake of our daughter and future grandson. Fate often teaches us unexpected lessons. I learned to forgive and be more tolerant. I realized that even after the most difficult trials, you can find the strength to move on and build a new, better life. Although I have lost a lot, I have gained important lessons and experiences that have made me stronger and wiser. Now I live for the future, for the sake of my daughter and for the sake of my grandson. I know that we still have many challenges ahead, but I am ready for them. After all, life goes on, and every new day is a chance for a better future. And subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even click to the next one.